Recordando a Don Antonio de Torres. La historia del constructor de guitarras y el árbol cypress.
For over 40 years I've been making guitars, starting out with classical and flamenco guitars, now specializing in vintage style archtop steel string guitars and nylon string jazz guitars. In 1988 I had the good fortune to be able to work with world-class classical guitar builder José Ramón. He had just published his book about Antonio de Torres, a thorough study of the work and life of the 19th century guitar maker. To this day, the guitars of Antonio de Torres inspire me in the way I select the woods, how to make a harmonious looking instrument and, above all, to strive for excellence in quality of sound and response. Torres was born in Almeria, Spain in 1817, and exactly 200 years later, I decided to follow the trail of Antonio de Torres, guided by the Romanilius book. Antonio de Torres was a master in all disciplines required to make an exceptional guitar. He had a great aesthetic feeling for the instrument, creating a harmonious looking shape and ornamentation. He was a master craftsman in making and fitting the herringbone and other inlays. He had an intuitive approach for using the available wood for the maximum resultant sound. I travel around in Spain to get to know more about the life and work of this remarkable man. On the 10th of June 1817, Antonio de Torres was born here at the corner of Calle Aurora in La Cañada de Almeria, a suburb of Almeria. This must have been a very big surprise for his parents, because his mother was 45, his father was in his 50s, and then to have a child must have been a miracle. He spent his youth here and also his last years in life, because only 50 meters away from the place where he was born, he finally bought a house where he worked the last decade of his life. When Torres is 16 years old, he moves with his parents to Vera, a very small town just 20 kilometers east. Not a nice place to live, bad water, the ground is not productive, and there are more problems because when he is 17 he is called for military service to fight in the Carlist Wars, and his parents didn't like that at all, their only son. So finally he gets into the military service, but he is dismissed because of ill health. And to be sure that he's not drafted again, he marries Juana Maria Lopez, then 13 years old, in 1834. In Vera, Torres and his family faces difficult times. He works as a carpenter, but his income is very low. He can't pay his taxes. Even the local authorities take away his best quality saw. And his two young daughters die in infancy, and on top of that also his wife dies in 1845. Then Torres thinks, okay, this is it, this town is not going to bring me happiness, I'm moving to Sevilla. 1845, Torres arrives in Sevilla. Sevilla is the exact opposite of the provincial town of Vera. Here there are other guitar makers, there are poets, artists, social life, wood merchants, which is also of course important to have the materials. Not much is known about his first 10 years here, but beginning 1850s he settles his workshop in the Calle, Cerrageria. Julian Arcas, 1850s, he advised Torres, who was making guitar part-time, to take up his guitar professionally, and Torres did. One of the earliest guitars known, made by Torres in 1853, and you can see here that the design of the instrument is still evolving, but already he was a master in the inlay technique. The meander inlay and the herringbone is done absolutely meticulous. (1856), Calle, Cerrageria. Here is where Torres reaches his creative peak in guitar making. In Sevilla, Torres starts to make guitars that unify all aspects of guitar making that went before him. And it's that design that we know today as the classical guitar. Torres studied all the guitars that went before him, and he combined the features of these guitars and he made it into one uniform design. In the shape, he used 5 shapes or 5 plantillas, and the fan bracing is still used by guitar makers today. And Torres was faithful to this design throughout his whole career. In 1856 he makes the famous Leona guitar for Julian Arcas. Two years later, the exhibition guitar with all the beautiful herringbone and meander inlays. It's 1858 and Torres exhibits one of his guitars here in the Royal Alcazar de Sevilla. And for this highly ornamented guitar he wins the bronze medal. And a few years later he makes a guitar with papier-mâché back in size, just to prove his point that the soundboard of the guitar is the most important factor. And again a few years later, 1864, he makes a guitar for his own use to play. He's not only a guitar maker, he's also a player, and that guitar will be purchased by Targa 5 years later. In 1868, Torres marries Josefa Martin Rosado here in this church, the El Salvador church, just a few blocks away from his home. And it is said that his best man at the wedding was Julian Arcas. The cypress tree, or the botanical name is Cupressus Sempervirens, ever living, ever green. And the tree is exactly midway between life here on earth and the eternal life after death. It is planted all over Spain in cemeteries. The ancient Greek used it for making coffins, and of course it is for centuries is used in the making of musical instruments. Flamenco guitars are very often made of Spanish cypress, and the fragrance of the tree is also everlasting. When you have a flamenco guitar of cypress, the fragrance is constantly coming out of the sound hole and inspires, of course, the music. It's 1870 and Torres returns to Almeria. He can no longer support himself with guitar building, and together with his wife he starts a china shop here at number 23 Calle. And after 5 years he starts to make guitars again as a part-time occupation, and making 5-6 guitars a year, and he's doing that until probably 1880. Torres buys this house in 1881, but he does not move in until the death of his second wife in 1883. And it is here where he makes the second guitar for Tarrega. The house didn't look like this. The facade was renovated in 1900. But this is the place where he worked until his death, and making 10-12 guitars a year. The cypress tree has a long tradition in connecting the living and the dead. Here at cemeteries, it's the keeper of the eternal peace of the deceased, and it can be found on many cemeteries in Spain. In 1892 Torres dies, then 75 years old, and he is interred here on this cemetery with a simple ceremony, his body wrapped in his working clothes, and it's here that his remains stay for 7 years, and then the remains were taken to the general ossuary. When Torres dies, his debts are greater than his possessions, and much of his materials, his workbench, it's all gone. Only 3 items are left. These 3 tools are tools that Torres used, and that's all that is left of his guitar making career here in this small glass box. What Torres created in his lifetime set new standards for the nylon string guitar. Without him, the classical and flamenco guitar would not exist as we know it today. Torres refined the guitar in shape, wood thickness, bracing, methods of assembly, proportions, ornamentation, inlays, and most of all, beauty of sound. The cypress wood. For me, it is my connection to Torres, being the wood that connects the living to the deceased. And even though the great guitar maker is no longer with us, inspiration, like hope, springs eternal. And the work of Antonio de Torres is an everyday inspiration for building my guitars.
Antonio de Torres, genial guitarrero, padre de la guitarra española moderna, artífice de la leona, hijo insigne de la cañada de San Urbano. Recordando a Don Antonio de Torres. La historia del constructor de guitarras y el árbol cypress.